Howdy, y'all. Hope you guys are doing well. Welcome back to another installment, number 5 of Trad Disputed Questions on probably, I would say, upper end of the controversial question, right? It's kind of a question that Catholics whisper to their friends but are kind of too afraid to say out loud in public. Is Pope Francis Catholic? That is the question we will be looking at. And of course, you could get really, really technical with this discussion. You could approach it very, very loosely. I'm going to try to do it very, very I would say moderately in the context of the laity, giving a very balanced, if you will, take on all of this. But this episode, I think, comes with a bit of divine providence. So, number one, we are one day away, at least at the time of this recording, from the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross. The image of Christ is the image that, of course, we see in all the famous commentaries on Matthew 24, talking about the great sign in heaven when the Son of God returns. It will be the sign of the cross, and that all nations will recognize Christ as King. St. Paul alludes to this more in the book of Philippians, that every knee will confess Christ as King and every knee will bow. But then also at the same time, today we have kind of breaking news, at least on this side of the world, that Pope Francis has now come out in the context of an ecumenical meeting in Singapore and said that all religions lead to God, and whether you're Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, or Christian, we shouldn't be debating these things more or less. We shouldn't be saying that each of each other's religions are right or wrong. They all lead to the one God. If you want more of a in-depth take on that, you can watch my video I published on my show just over that said topic recently. So it's a bit providential that we're going to be talking about this, and we're going to be kind of bouncing this question back and forth. And as I said in my episode, I'm not sure if we're really going to have that much drastic difference. I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting. I've never actually asked him point blank, do you think Pope Francis is Catholic? And so we'll see how the discussion goes. Before we dive into that, make sure, of course, like this video, subscribe to the shows, because this is on multiple ones, if you're not already a part of the different families, MOC and the traditional Thomist. Also, let me know in the comments below if you continue to like my subtitles that I have. I've been kind of messing around and joking with different subtitles. So my one for today is too controversial for Nova et Vetera. So it's just kind of a joke. I have a long string of different jokes going on. So before we dive in, Tim, we haven't made an episode in like, not just on this, but just in general, like at least in a month and a half to 2 months. So I heard that you had one member of your family get married off. So congratulations there. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I've had a busy August. I was just checking it looks like the last time we did a show was the Trad Disputed Questions was the 2nd of August.
Dang,
and then
wow.
I've just been busy with my daughter getting married. So, yeah, we're blessed. What a great it's a great time to be a Catholic. September is an exciting month. Lots of great feast days, as you said. Really excited because we're having our troops camp out this weekend. And we're going to have a procession with the relic of the True Cross. So I'm really excited
Cool.
for that.
Very cool.
Yeah, so is Pope Francis Catholic? Certainly a propos to the breaking news today.
1,000%, 1,000%. Funny story I actually have about a relic of the True Cross on my show. For viewers of my show, you'll know that I have a couple of videos going and protesting different wicked organizations that will show up into our small Texas towns to hold different events. And one of them was in San Marcos, Texas. There was the Church of Satan, or the Satanic Temple. One of them came out to do a satanic invocation at City Hall, under the First Amendment clause.
Oh, man.
And there was like 400 of us Catholics outside protesting, and like 2 Baptists. So it was kind of a funny mix. And there was like 3 to 12 of the satanic people, more or less. It was kind of hard to tell exactly how many there were coming out of the building. But when they were coming out of the building, they came over to try to like mock us from a distance, police in between us and stuff. But one of my friends, he has a 3rd-class relic of the True Cross. It was a crucifix that he touched on one of his pilgrimages to the actual wood of the cross. When he brought that out, I saw with my own eyes. It was one of those things that you read in Lives of the Saints. They literally ran. They literally took off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dang, that's insane.
And it was a small crucifix, maybe like yay big, 6 inches big or something. So it's not like in a crowd of 400 people, you're really just going to pick that out and just,
right,
freak out or something like that. It was
the power of a 3rd-class relic too. I mean,
it was
the
amazing.
lowest level. Sweet.
It was amazing. Well, yeah, let's see. Let's go ahead and dive into today's discussion. So I want to put this also as kind of a question to the viewer. Let us know in the comments below. Do you think Pope Francis is Catholic? And I want to start off first and foremost with a definition. Really, with questions like this, we need to define our terms correctly so that we're not speaking past each other. And I think that the classic definition of a Catholic is one that we would agree on. It is the definition by Pope Pius XII in Mystici Corporis, paragraph 22. And so for viewers, you can look that up yourselves if you'd like, but I'll go ahead and read it to you. He says this quote, actually, only those are to be included as members of the church who have been baptized, profess the true faith, and who have not been so unfortunate to separate themselves from the unity of the body or been excluded by legitimate authority for grave faults committed, end quote. It's coming from paragraph 22 or 23 of Mystici Corporis. And basically, it's a threefold classic definition, right? So number one, in order to be a Catholic, according to Pius XII, we see number one, that you have to be baptized, right? So this is actually something that is solemnly defined, that baptism is something that's necessary for salvation. And that's the one thing that all the theologians are going to agree on, 1000%. There's a complete unanimity when it comes to baptism. The second is that they have to profess the true faith. So they have to hold the Catholic faith whole and entire in all areas of both doctrine and morals. So as an example, when according to polls, 95% of American Catholics believe contraception's okay, 86% believe gay marriage is okay, 54% believe in abortion that is okay. Those are moral issues that would exclude them from the church if they know that the church teaches and against that, but they go ahead and hold it. They are not holding the true faith. And then finally, they need to recognize and submit to the said hierarchy of the church. Really, when you get into the weeds of what the manuals say on this subject, they emphasize more so recognizing the Pope has the ability and the authority to teach in and of himself, in and of the office. So recognizing the offices of the papacy. And they make this distinction because really where the Eastern Orthodox, the reason we call them schismatic is not because they are refusing to obey a pope, right? But rather more so because they refuse the office in and of itself in the context of its universal jurisdiction. And so we have to kind of keep those distinctions at mind. For a proper theological note for the last two of these areas of distinction, this would be something that would be at least Catholic doctrine because it's taught openly in an encyclical, if you're wanting the precise theological note for the latter two. Although I've seen theologians say they're also implicitly defined. So that is kind of our basic summary, right? Baptism holds the true faith, recognizes and submits to the authorities. They've not been excluded for grave faults, right? That's what a Catholic is. So I guess before we go any further, would you agree with my enumeration, Tim? Would you say that that's a good and balanced definition?
Well, far be it from me to disagree with what Pius XII says. So,
Sure. I always want to make sure my interpretation is correct, though, more or less.
I mean, I think that the presupposition that I would like to emphasize here, one quick note I want to say before we even address this, and that's simply that I think it's important that we don't judge the Holy Father too harshly. We don't harden our hearts against him or anything like that. This is what trad critics tell us that we do. And I think some trads do that. So I want to concede that to our critics, first of all. We don't want to do that. But at the same time, I also want the presupposition, I will say to trad critics, the presupposition that I'm making here is actually from Lumen Gentium when it says that parents are the first preachers of the faith to their children. So that presupposes that parents can know what is Catholic. Yeah. We can't be the first preachers of our children to our children unless we know what is Catholic. So this presupposes that we don't need to rely on private judgment. We can actually just receive the public judgment that's already been given to us by the magisterium. We can just read it in a catechism. It's already there. And we're just reading what Pius XII is saying, like profess the true faith. What is the true faith? You can read it in a catechism, countless catechisms, and we can preach it to our children. We don't need permission from the current Holy Father to do that. We don't need permission from our current priest to do that. We can actually know what is Catholic because if we're the first preachers of the Catholic faith, this presupposes that we can actually know that, not based on private judgment. So everything you just said is, I think that's entirely legitimate. Obviously, we're getting into more difficult, strange questions when we talk about whether the Pope is Catholic. I'm sure you're going to get into that next,
Yes, of
or
course. Yeah, no,
whatever that.
those are great points. I really appreciate your opinion, or your point rather, on Lumen Gentium's statement, because really one argument that is typically leveled at the feet of traditionalism is private judgment. Right, you're falling into private judgment, etc. But it's really a bad argument, and it's a bad argument because if you go and look up, for instance, in the International Catholic Theological Dictionary, the old, of course, Latin one, or just read classic magisterial or manuals on the magisterium, the notion of private judgment is that you are making up an interpretation not based on the deposits of faith, but more or less just out of your own wisdom, your own know-how, for lack of better words. For us to
Yeah,
come out and say the popes have taught thus, and then this statement doesn't seem to jive with it, that's not private judgment. That is public judgment, because you're saying, okay, the popes have taught thus and thus, and we're merely comparing. So it's a good thing to kind of bring up, because it's some good apologetics. And then, of course, before I continue, I went ahead and just checked because I was a little bit fuzzy. Yes, I was correct. The theological note that at minimum would be for the secondary clauses of same faith and submitting to the hierarchy. This is the theological note for that is at least at a minimum Catholic doctrine, because it is taught explicitly in an encyclical, and at most it would be something that would be proximate to definitive. So just if people are interested in that. Okay, so to move on from that, I want to talk a little bit about this notion of the unity of faith, because if we understand the unity of faith, what is the unity of faith, what the theologians and the councils have said about it, it will help us to determine really, I think, the conclusion that we'll try to arrive at. Perhaps we'll arrive at different conclusions, but we'll at least kind of see the steps of where we'll arrive at those various conclusions. So I want to cite from a few various sources. So a couple sources, first and foremost, from Vatican I, that talk about the unity of faith. They refer to it more so as the bond of faith. That's the language they use. So this one comes right here from the section on faith, and they say the
is
eternal
this
ship.
Filius Dei? Is
This
this
is
what?
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
They say,